It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon in a fading desert town. A single father. A plate of warm leftovers. And then a voice. Soft. Barely above a whisper. "Can I have your leftovers?" He turned and saw a pair of eyes in a wheelchair that would change everything he thought he knew about love loss and second chances. If stories of quiet resilience, unexpected connection, and the healing power of kindness move your heart, subscribe to the channel, because some stories aren't just told. They're felt. Now let me take you to the second table, where a simple act of compassion began a journey neither of them saw coming. The wind rolled through the dry streets of Willow Bend, like an old song no one remembered the words to. Dust danced over the cracked pavement, skimming across Boots benches and the sun-baked hood of Mercer Wade's rusty pickup, parked outside the only diner within 30 miles. The town was fading one boarded window at a time, and Mercer didn't mind. Fading things left fewer questions. He sat alone at a metal table just outside the diner, the kind that wobbled no matter how you set it. A plate of brisket and cornbread sat in front of him, steam curling into the summer heat. Like it didn't care, it was already 95 degrees. He wore a threadbare denim shirt, sleeves rolled up arms, sun-browned and strong from ranch work. His long hair was pulled into a loose tie at the back of his neck, the only part of him he still let be wild. He had no appetite, but he always ordered the same thing on Thursdays. His little girl, Gracie, loved the brisket. She'd take the leftovers home, warm them in their tiny kitchen, and swear it tasted better when he wasn't around to see her dump hot sauce all over it. Mercer picked up his fork, more out of habit than hunger. "Sir, may I have your leftovers?" The voice was soft, not quite a whisper, but enough to freeze the movement of his hand. He turned slowly, thinking someone must be talking to someone else. She was small, younger than Gracie, maybe 11, 12. Her hair was sun-bleached, tangled. Her cheeks were hollow, her arms far too thin. But it wasn't those things that held Mercer in place, like a ghost had passed through him. It was her eyes. Gray, wide alert, not the kind of alert that comes from curiosity. The kind that comes from knowing hunger too long, from waiting for a world that never circles back. She sat in an old wheelchair the kind hospitals stopped using 20 years ago. The wheels squeaked. One foot was twisted awkwardly, resting sideways on the footrest. Her hands, small and clenched, gripped the fabric of a faded backpack that looked too heavy for her frame. "I don't need much," she added quickly. "I'm not picky, just if you're not going to finish it." Mercer blinked. The heat warped the air around them, but this moment cut through it with surgical precision. He set the fork down. "Have a seat," he said, motioning to the other chair. The girl hesitated. She was used to being chased off, not invited in. Her arms stayed clutched around her pack. "I won't bite," Mercer added with a gentle shrug. "Food's better with company anyway." Still hesitant, she wheeled herself closer with slow, practiced motions. Up close, he saw the dirt beneath her fingernails, the faint yellow bruising along her forearm, the worn soles of shoes 2 sizes too big. He slid his plate toward her. "I'm Mercer." She didn't answer. At first, only reached out and tore off a small piece of cornbread like it might disappear. She chewed slowly, eyes never leaving his face, as if gauging what kind of trap this might be. After a moment, she spoke. "Junie. That's short for something." She shook her head. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Mercer watched her eat in small bites, like she was trying to make the meal last for hours. She offered no explanation, and he didn't ask. Not yet. A gust of wind stirred the dust again, making Mercer blink against it. He reached for his cup of iced tea and sipped it, while watching the sky start to change color. The sun was angling west, painting gold along the edges of the old gas station across the road. "Where's home, Junie?" he asked finally. She glanced at the street like the word didn't mean what it used to. Don't have one? Not for a while now. Mercer nodded slowly. He remembered that feeling, that stretch of time after his wife died when the house was still standing, but nothing inside it felt like home. Someone looking for you, he tried again. She looked down at her lap. Not that I know of. The words hit him harder than they should have. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, studying her. Not in pity, he knew better than to offer that. Pity was for people who planned to walk away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his pocket knife, and grabbed the empty to-go box from the table. With calm, deliberate motions, he carved her name into the wooden lid. Junie. He handed it to her. Your box, now. If you're coming by again, you can keep it here. I'll make sure it gets filled. Junie held the box like it was breakable. Her fingers traced the letters, as if she couldn't believe someone had spelled her name on purpose. Why, she asked, her voice small again. Mercer paused before answering. My daughter's got a box, just like it, he said, because no one should feel like a stranger to food. Or to people. She stared at him for a long time, then nodded once. I'll come back tomorrow, she said. And just like that, Mercer realized this wasn't about leftovers. This was about beginning again. The next morning, Mercer found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He waited. He sat at the same table outside the diner, a second plate ordered, and untouched across from him. He didn't look at the food. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, on the long stretch of road that shimmered under the rising sun like a river of heat and memory. He told himself he wasn't foolish for doing this. It was just food. It was kindness. That was all. But somewhere deeper, a quiet part of him hoped that the girl with the solemn eyes and the hunger-wrapped dignity would return. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The tea in his cup grew warm. He was about to give up, chalk it up to a single strange kindness, the sort of thing that appeared once and vanished like dust in the wind, when he heard the faintest squeak of old wheels. Junie. Same backpack, same shoes, different expression. She came into view, slowly wheeling herself across the gravel lot. Her head was high, not proud, but steady. She didn't hesitate this time when she reached the table. Mercer noticed she had combed her hair, or at least tried. It was pulled back into a messy ponytail, tied with a rubber band. He didn't say anything, just gestured to the plate. Still warm, he said. She gave him a look more like acknowledgement than gratitude, and began to eat. Mercer didn't push conversation. He simply sat and drank his tea. There was something comforting about the sound of her chewing. Maybe it was because, for too long, every meal he'd eaten had been accompanied only by the buzz of the refrigerator or the hollow echo of silence. Gracie was usually at school when he came home for lunch, or asleep early when he returned from night shifts. The world had grown too quiet. Until now. You sleep okay? He asked. Junie gave a half nod. Better than usual. Got a place to stay. She shrugged. The back of that dry cleaner's. Not open anymore. Nobody checks. Mercer took that in without judgment. He knew how people ended up in places like that. It wasn't always about drugs or laziness. Sometimes it was just one bad break. A wrong turn life didn't bother correcting. He sipped his tea. You ever go to school? She didn't look up. Used to. He waited, let the pause linger. Before the accident, she added. What kind of accident, Car? My dad was drunk. Her voice flattened. I couldn't feel my legs after. He walked away with a scratch. Never looked back. Mercer swallowed hard. He couldn't tell if it was anger or grief or both rising in his throat. Where's your mom? Junie's jaw tensed. Gone, she said. Years before that. He nodded slowly. You got anyone else? She shook her head. No one. He recognized the weight of that word. He'd carried it too once when Gracie was still in diapers, And June, his wife, was fading in a hospice bed, asking him not to close his heart, even when she couldn't open her eyes anymore. You know, he said, when Gracie was about your age, she used to collect stones. Said every stone was a memory. She kept them in a glass jar by her bed. Junie raised her eyes for the first time. What happened to the jar? She stopped filling it after her mom passed. One day she dumped it out in the yard. Said she was tired of carrying memories. They sat quiet for a beat. A bird chirped from the power line above them, then flitted off as if embarrassed to be the only thing making noise. Junie reached into her backpack and pulled out the to-go box from yesterday. She opened it, gently, looked at the carving of her name. Then she set it between them like a contract. I didn't think I'd see this again, she said. Most people don't remember my name. Mercer leaned forward. I remember things that matter. She blinked. For a second, he thought he saw moisture in those steel-gray eyes, but she looked away before it could turn into anything more. You want to work? He asked. Junie turned back, surprised. I could use help. Just light stuff. Cleaning tables, counting napkins, picking music on the radio. Can't pay much, but I can pay some. Why? Because people work where they belong. And you look like someone who's earned her place. She stared at him. Hard. You're weird, she said finally. Mercer smiled. You're not the first to tell me that. A pause, then a shrug. All right, I'll try. But I'm not good with people. You're good with silence, he said. That's harder. Junie chewed her last bite and looked out over the road. The heat shimmered again. The wind kicked up more dust. But Mercer noticed that the girl's shoulders weren't as hunched this morning. Her eyes weren't quite as guarded. And when she turned back to him to ask same time tomorrow, Mercer replied without thinking, without doubt. Yeah, Junie, same time tomorrow. And this time he didn't just give her his leftovers. He gave her a reason to return. It was Friday afternoon, when Mercer found himself digging through the cluttered top drawer of his old pine workbench, searching for a roll of duct tape. The diner's back screen door had come loose at the hinge, and he wasn't in the mood to deal with a hardware store run. The drawer was a time capsule, half-used Penn's bolts, without partners, a rusted harmonica that hadn't made a sound in years, and beneath it all, a yellowed envelope. Mercer paused his fingers, grazing the edge of the paper like it might burn him. He hadn't meant to see it again. Not today. Not with Junie out front humming to herself while cleaning salt shakers, the radio playing Patsy Cline in the background. But grief had a way of hiding in ordinary places. Drawers, songs, the shape of someone else's eyes. He took a breath and lifted the envelope. It had her handwriting on it. June Wade, his late wife. Curved letters, neat and hopeful, written months before cancer stole her voice. It was the last thing she'd written before slipping away. He hadn't had the heart to destroy it. He hadn't had the heart to read it again either. Mercer tucked it into the breast pocket of his shirt and pushed the drawer shut. Out front, Junie was arranging jelly jars like an artist. She worked slowly but precisely. It was hard to believe she was only 12. There was an oldness in the way she moved, like her childhood had been traded for survival too soon. You want a break? He asked, stepping onto the porch. She looked up. Nope. I like doing this. You always this stubborn yep. I come from a long line of people who don't like being told what to do. Mercer chuckled. That makes two of us. Junie smirked, but it faded quickly. Your daughter. Does she come here? He hesitated. She used to. Now she's with her grandma during the week. I only get weekends. Junie nodded like she understood, though she probably didn't. Not really. You miss her every minute, Mercer said. There was a pause. Then Junie asked quietly, did she look like her mom? He studied the way her fingers fidgeted on the table's edge, pretending not to care about the answer. Exactly like her, he said. Same freckles, Same stubborn jaw. Junie went still, then asked almost too softly, "Do you ever forget her face?" "No," Mercer said without hesitation. "Not a day." She nodded. Her eyes drifted toward the street again, and Mercer didn't press. He could feel the edge of the letter through his pocket warm against his chest. "You want to hear something weird?" he asked. Junie perked up. "Always. I still hear June sometimes. In my head. She'll say something sarcastic when I overcook the eggs or leave laundry in the washer. Sometimes I think she's laughing at me when I forget my keys." Junie gave a small smile. "That's not weird." "No," she shook her head. "That's kinda nice." He considered that for a moment. "Yeah, I guess it is." That evening, after Junie had gone, wheeling herself quietly back toward the empty lot behind the dry cleaner, Mercer sat at the table where she'd been. He pulled the letter from his pocket and unfolded it with careful fingers. It read, "Mercer, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted. You were never good with long talks, so I'll keep this short. I know you'll hurt. I know you'll close up and disappear inside yourself. That's okay for a while. But listen to me. When someone shows up in your life who's hurting like you are, don't turn away. Don't pretend you don't see them, especially if they remind you of me. That's not a ghost. That's your second chance to love without losing yourself. Let love find you again, even if it wears different shoes and a different face." June Mercer didn't realize his hands were shaking until he tried to refold the letter. He pressed the creases down slowly, like smoothing out memories. The street outside had gone quiet, the way small towns always did after sunset. He stepped off the porch and stared into the horizon. There was dust in the air again, swirling under the glow of the street lamp. He thought of Junie's face, the way she never asked for more than she thought she deserved. The way she looked at food, like it was a favor, not a right. And those eyes watchful, bruised by the world, but never blinking. She didn't just need a place to eat. She needed someone to believe she was worth staying for. Mercer tucked the letter back into his pocket. He didn't know what he was yet to Junie. A stranger, a fork and a plate, a man with a table and a little kindness. Maybe that was enough for now. But one thing had become clear. She wasn't the only one who'd been left behind in the dust. The sign above the porch had once read, "Maggie's Grill," though the paint had long since peeled down to flaking splinters. Mercer never bothered to take it down. He liked that it didn't pretend to be something new. It was just there, like he was. Still standing. Still useful in its own way. Saturday morning came with the smell of damp cedar and rising bread. Mercer had been up since dawn, kneading biscuit dough with calloused hands and something like purpose in his chest. He'd rebuilt the porch railing the week before. Today he cleaned the old register and oiled the creaky back door. It was odd how much lighter things felt now that Junie was part of the routine. When she arrived, he was already setting out 2 plates and a glass pitcher of sweet tea. Junie rolled up wearing a cap far too large for her bill turned sideways in defiance. "Someone got a makeover," Mercer teased. She smirked and tilted the hat like a crown. "A guy at the junkyard gave it to me. Said I looked like trouble." "You do," Mercer said. "The quiet kind." Junie laughed, a short, rusty thing like she hadn't done it in a long while. Then instinctively she clutched her stomach, as if laughter might crack something inside her. Mercer noticed, but said nothing. He simply refilled her glass. "I was thinking," he said, settling across from her. "Maybe it's time we gave this place a name again." She looked up from her plate. "You mean, like an actual restaurant?" "Well, not quite. I don't think anyone's going to give us a food license just yet. But we've got tables, food, and enough stories to entertain a crowd." Junie chewed on a piece of bacon, eyes narrowing. "What would you call it?" Mercer scratched his jaw. I was thinking. The second table. Her brow furrowed. What's that mean? He leaned back, arms crossed loosely. You know how in old churches and homes there was always a second table. Not for the family or the guests of honor, but for the workers, the kids, the ones who showed up after everyone else was full. Junie blinked. You mean the leftovers table? Right. But I always thought it was more than that. It's where the best conversations happened. The real ones. No performances. Just people being human. Junie looked down at her plate, then nodded. I like that. Then it settled. By noon, they had pulled out the other tables stored in the back room, dusted them off, and set out mismatched chairs like they were arranging an orchestra. Think anyone'll come? Junie asked. Mercer shrugged. Doesn't matter. We'll be here. She glanced at him, a question flickering behind her eyes. Why are you doing all this? Doing what this? She motioned to the porch, the tables, the pitcher of tea sweating in the sun. For me. Mercer didn't answer right away. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, then turned to her. When I lost my wife, he said slowly, people stopped calling after a while. I didn't blame them. Grief makes folks uncomfortable. But one day, a neighbor dropped off soup. Just left it on the step with a note. You're still someone. Junie looked at him, eyes softening. I never forgot that soup, Mercer said. It didn't fix me. But it reminded me I wasn't invisible. So now, I guess I'm passing the spoon. She didn't reply, just sat very still, as if any movement might let tears slip through the cracks she worked hard to hide. Later that afternoon, as the sun slanted low, Junie pulled a spiral notebook from her backpack. She flipped through a few dog-eared pages, then turned the book toward Mercer. It was a drawing. Pencil sketch. Crude but beautiful. It showed the porch, the tables, the dishes all from her angle. Mercer was in the frame too. Head turned, hair tied back. Hand holding out a plate to an invisible someone. This is how I see it, Junie said. It's not perfect, but it's real. Mercer studied the lines, the shadows. There was something in the way she'd drawn his face. Tired, yes, but peaceful. Like a man reclaiming some lost part of himself. You've got an eye, he said. I draw, so I don't forget, she replied. People? Places. Things that made me feel like I mattered. She flipped the page. Another sketch, this one of a little girl maybe 7 or 8 with wild curls and a scraped knee. She was sitting under a tree, arms around a cat. Is that you? Mercer asked. Junie shook her head. That was my friend Annie. She used to let me stay in her garage when it got too cold, before she moved away. There was a pause. I never got to say goodbye. Mercer felt something tighten in his chest. Loss didn't always come with funerals or endings. Sometimes it just slipped out the back door before you knew it was gone. Well, he said, voice gentle. She's in your book now. That's a kind of goodbye. Junie looked at the drawing again, then quietly closed the notebook. The wind picked up lifting dust from the street into golden spirals. Mercer watched it rise, then fall again like breath. He turned to Junie and said, You know what I think? What I think this second table of ours might just be the first thing either of us has built in a long time. And Junie, after a long, thoughtful silence, replied, Then let's not let it fall apart. The air was still that morning, unusually so. Even the wind, which usually swept across Willow Bend like it had a job to do, seemed to hold its breath. Mercer felt it before he saw it. That quiet premonition that something was off. He'd grown up with horses. Animals sensed it first, just like he did now. The porch felt colder. The sunlight didn't land right. Junie was inside the second table sorting sugar packets by color, for no reason other than it soothed her. She hummed faintly under her breath, off-key but content. Mercer was refilling the tea dispenser when the knock came. Not on the front door, not on the back. But on the side wall, 3 sharp, deliberate raps that didn't belong to this place, not to the gentle rhythm of their small ritual. He walked around the corner, towel still in his hand. A man stood there, mid-40s, maybe older. Dirty blonde beard gone mostly gray. Leather jacket torn at the cuffs. The stench of stale whiskey clung to him like sweat. He wasn't from town. He didn't smile. "Looking for someone?" Mercer asked, keeping his voice neutral. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward the porch windows where Junie was visible, her head down, still lost in the comfort of sorting. "I see you found her," the man said. Mercer's body went still, like muscle turned to stone. "You'll have to be more specific," the man smirked. Kid in the chair. "Her name's Junie, ain't it?" The name sounded foul in his mouth, like he didn't deserve to know it. "Who's asking?" Mercer said. The man pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and waved it lazily. A birth certificate. Official. With Junie's name on it. His name, too. Mason Weller. Father. "Didn't know she was still alive?" he said, his voice dry like it was used more for spitting than speaking. "Till someone at a shelter said she was seen out here." Mercer's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" he asked. Mason shrugged. "She's mine. I got proof. Figured maybe it's time to take her back." Mercer stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "You left her in a parking lot after crashing a car you were too drunk to drive." Mason didn't flinch. "And yet here I am." Junie appeared in the doorway, then the smile fading from her face the instant she saw him. Mercer turned to her, saw her hands trembling on the wheels of her chair. She didn't speak. Mason gave her a half-hearted wave. "Hey, Junebug, you been good." The nickname hit like a slap. Junie said nothing. Her face had gone blank, the kind of blank Mercer had seen in combat veterans and rescue dogs. A face shut off to survive. "She don't need anything from you," Mercer said, stepping slightly in front of her. "She's mine," Mason repeated. "And I can prove it." "What have you got? A grill?" "A guilty conscience." Mercer didn't answer. He looked back at Junie. Her eyes didn't move, locked on some far point behind the man who used to be her father. "I'll call the sheriff," Mercer said. "You want a legal fight?" "Fine. But you're not laying a finger on her." Mason didn't seem fazed. "She's worth money, you know. Disability checks. State care. Not much, but it adds up. I ain't here to play daddy. Just want what I'm owed." The words made Mercer's stomach turn. He stepped forward until only inches separated them. "Get off my property." Mason held up his hands. All right. Don't need to get rowdy. Just wanted to let you know I'll be back with paperwork." He walked away like he hadn't just dropped a bomb, like this was just a business call. When the dust settled, Mercer turned to Junie. She hadn't moved, her hand still clenched on the wheels. Face, pale, jaw tight. "Junie," he said, gently crouching beside her. "You're okay. He's gone." But she didn't answer. Not right away. Only after several minutes of silence did she whisper, "I thought he was dead." Mercer exhaled slowly. "I wish he was, if I'm being honest." She looked at him, then eyes wide. "You do." He nodded. "Because you deserve better than that man walking around pretending he ever cared about you." Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. She blinked them back, swallowed them like she had every other ache in her short life. "What if he takes me?" she asked. Mercer felt those words like a blade. "He won't. You don't know that." "No," he said. "But I know this. Whatever I have to do to protect you, I'll do it. Even if I have to drag every lawyer in the county into that diner and make them eat my biscuits until they believe me." Junie gave a shaky laugh, and it broke the tension like glass underfoot. "You're serious?" she asked. "Dead serious." "I've fed worse." Her smile didn't last long, but it was enough. Enough to promise tomorrow would still be theirs to claim. That night, Mercer sat with a cup of black coffee and a folder of custody paperwork spread across his counter. It had been years since he'd walked into a courthouse. Years since he'd had to fight for anything other than keeping the roof from leaking. But this wasn't a roof. This was a girl in a wheelchair who sorted sugar packets and drew faces from memory. A girl who deserved better than a second abandonment. And if the law wanted to test how far a man like Mercer Wade would go to protect a child who wasn't his by blood, but was his in every other way, then they'd better be ready to lose. The courthouse in Pima County didn't look like much, just a faded stucco building with crooked blinds and a flickering overhead light that buzzed like a fly trapped in a bottle. It smelled faintly of old coffee lemon cleaner and air conditioning that never quite won the battle against Arizona heat. Mercer sat on the hard plastic bench outside the clerk's office, hat in his lap, shoulders tense beneath his worn denim shirt. He hadn't worn this shirt in years, not since June's memorial, but it felt right. Solid. Sober. In his hand was a file folder thick with affidavits, letters, photographs, and one carefully folded drawing of the second table signed Junie. Inside was her handwriting, her hope. But inside, Mercer was fear. He hadn't felt fear like this since the night June first said the word cancer. This was different, though. This wasn't about losing someone to something you couldn't fight. This was about possibly losing someone because you weren't enough to stop it. Back at the diner, Junie was silent. She hadn't spoken much since Mason's visit. Her drawings stopped. Her humming vanished. She moved through their routines mechanically, cleaning, arranging, sweeping, as though rehearsing for a world that no longer wanted her voice. That morning, as Mercer prepared to leave for the courthouse, he found her sitting on the floor of the storage room, her back to a stack of flour sacks, knees pulled up to her chest. He crouched beside her. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Hey." His voice softened. "Talk to me." "I shouldn't have stayed," she whispered. Mercer felt the floor shift under him. "Why would you say that? Because this happens," she said. "People let me in, then someone comes and takes it all away. It's like I don't get to keep anything good. Like there's a limit on it." Mercer took a slow breath. He wanted to say she was wrong, but what right did he have to argue with a child who had already survived abandonment twice? "You're not a burden, Junie." She shook her head. "I'm a problem. I've always been one. That's why my mom left. That's why he drinks. That's why people walk away." Mercer felt something in his chest shatter quietly but completely. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the same letter from June he had shown no one else since the funeral. He unfolded it slowly. "Read this," he said. Junie blinked at him. "What is it?" "It's from my wife, before she died." Junie hesitated, then took it with trembling fingers. She read slowly. Her lips moved with the words, but no sound came out. When she finished, her hands dropped into her lap. She stared at the paper. She said to let love in. Junie whispered, "Even if it wears a different face." Mercer nodded. "You're not a burden. You're not a problem. You're that second chance." Junie wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "But what if the law doesn't see it that way?" Mercer stood and offered her his hand. "Then we change the law's mind." At the courthouse, Mercer handed over the file to the clerk, an older woman with purple glasses and a name tag that read, Doris. She looked at the folder, then back up at him. "You're not kin," she said, flipping through the documents. "No, ma'am. You don't have any legal rights to her." "No, ma'am. But you want custody?" "Yes, ma'am." Doris arched an eyebrow. "That's uphill, Mr. Wade. Steep and slippery." Mercer smiled faintly. "I'm good with uphill." She studied him a moment longer, then closed the folder. "All right," she said. "I've seen stranger things. You want the emergency hearing or full petition, whichever gets us protected faster." Doris nodded, once stamped a form, and slid it across the desk. "You've got a preliminary hearing next Tuesday. Bring the girl. Bring your truth." Sometimes that's enough. That night, Mercer returned to the diner, exhausted, dust-stained and sunburned. He found Junie where he'd left her in the porch, swing wheels locked arms, folded eyes searching the sky. He sat beside her. "You know," she said, "after a long while there was this lady in the last shelter I stayed in. She used to say there are two kinds of people in the world, the ones who feed you so they can feel good about themselves, and the ones who feed you so you can feel good about yourself." Mercer turned to her. "Which one am I?" She looked at him long and hard. "You built me a table," she said. "That's not about food." He nodded, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "And what about you?" he asked. "What kind are you?" Junie looked away. "I don't know yet." "Well," he said, voice gentle, "maybe we'll find out at that hearing next Tuesday." She didn't answer, but she reached out and slipped her small hand into his. No words, just fingers laced through fingers, like roots deciding it was finally safe to grow. The courtroom was small, paneled in faded oak that tried and failed to look dignified. The air smelled of paper, old air conditioning, and weak coffee. It was the kind of place that made big decisions feel too quiet, like a library with the power to rearrange lives. Junie sat next to Mercer, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her thrift store dress clean and pressed, though it didn't quite fit. She had brushed her hair back, and Mercer had brought a comb to settle the stubborn flyaways. She looked younger that morning, more like the 12-year-old she should have been, and also older, like someone who had waited too long to be seen. The judge, Honorable Patricia L. Maddox, was a heavy-set woman with short silver hair and a direct gaze that didn't allow room for performance. She adjusted her glasses as she looked over the file Mercer had submitted the week prior. "Mr. Wade," she said, her tone neither warm nor cold, "you are petitioning for emergency guardianship of Miss Juniper Weller. Do I have that right?" "Yes, ma'am," Mercer said. "You are not a relative." "No, ma'am. You have no legal training." "No, you are a restaurant owner." Mercer hesitated. "Sort of. It's more of a porch with a mission." That drew the faintest flicker of interest from the judge. "Explain." Mercer glanced at Junie, who gave him a tiny nod. He stood slowly, hands steady at his sides. "I own a place called The Second Table. It's not much. A porch, a few chairs, some mismatched dishes. But people come. People who don't usually get served first. We serve the kind of folks who've been forgotten, just like Junie was." Judge Maddox leaned forward slightly. "And how did you come to know the minor?" Mercer told the story plainly. No embellishments, just the facts. The meal. The question. The girl with eyes too quiet for her age. The letter from his wife. The drawings. The laughter that returned slowly like music from a long-forgotten instrument. When he finished, there was silence in the room. Then the judge turned to Junie. "Miss Weller," she said gently, "do you wish to say anything?" Junie nodded. Her voice was soft, but clear. "I don't remember my mom. My dad left me after I got hurt. I didn't think I'd ever stay anywhere longer than a week. But Mr. Wade, he saw me. Not like a problem or a chore, just me." She paused, then added, "He gave me a place at the table. Not the leftovers, the real seat. And I don't want to lose that." The judge's face didn't change, but her eyes softened barely. Junie pulled something from her lap, a folded sheet of paper, and handed it to the bailiff. "May I submit this?" she asked. The judge nodded. The bailiff handed it over. Judge Maddox unfolded it. It was a pencil sketch of the porch, the tables, the sweet tea pitcher sweating in the sun. But at the center, two figures. One man, one girl. Their hands stretched across the table, a fork between them shared. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, it read, "This is what home looks like to me." The judge stared at the paper for a long moment. Then she looked back at Mercer. "In your file," she said, "there's a letter from your deceased wife. Would you be willing to read it aloud?" Mercer felt his throat tighten. He hadn't read the words out loud to anyone, not even Gracie. But this moment was bigger than him. Bigger than grief. He took the letter from the folder, unfolded it carefully, and began to read. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted. You were never good with long talks, so I'll keep this short. When someone shows up in your life who's hurting like you are, don't turn away. Don't pretend you don't see them, especially if they remind you of me. Let love find you again, even if it wears different shoes and a different face." He stopped. The courtroom was silent. Even the buzzing light seemed to still. Judge Maddox set the sketch down slowly. "Mr. Wade," she said, her voice measured, but no longer impersonal. "I have reviewed the legal limitations of this case. You are not the child's kin, nor are you a licensed foster provider. And yet, the law does allow for guardianship in exceptional circumstances." She looked at Junie. "This, I believe, is exceptional." Junie gasped. Mercer didn't move. Couldn't. Relief flooded his body like water to parched soil. "I'm granting temporary guardianship for 90 days, the judge continued. "During that time, the Department of Family Services will conduct a home visit and background checks. If no red flags are found, you may petition for full custody." Mercer finally nodded, his mouth dry. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said hoarsely. Judge Maddox offered a rare, restrained smile. "Thank you, Mr. Wade. Not everyone shows up for the forgotten. But when someone does truly shows up, it can change everything." Outside the courthouse, Junie's wheels moved faster than usual. She turned a corner and let out a shaky laugh, part sob, part joy. Mercer followed her, and without asking knelt beside her wheelchair and pulled her into a one-armed hug. "You okay?" he asked. Junie buried her face in his shoulder and said muffled, "I've never been someone's anything before." Mercer held her tighter. "You're mine now," he said, "if that's all right with you." She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "I was yours the moment you didn't flinch." It started with a radio. Not the sleek kind with Bluetooth and chrome buttons, but the kind with knobs you had to jiggle just right. It sat on a shelf in the back of the second table, forgotten, until Junie found it while organizing boxes of old dishware. "Does this thing still work?" she asked, holding it up like a relic from a lost world. Mercer wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Hasn't played a tune since the Bush administration. But you can try." Junie grinned and twisted the knobs like she'd done it 100 times before. The first sounds were static, then a burst of mariachi, then more static, until finally the crackling chords of an old country ballad filtered through. "Score," she said. That was the beginning. Over the next few days, music filled the quiet corners of the diner. Junie hummed while wiping down tables, let melodies accompany her sketching, and even choreographed an elaborate napkin folding routine to a Willie Nelson song Mercer thought he'd grown tired of years ago. But one afternoon, as the heat pressed down thick and unmoving, Junie did something she hadn't done in months. She wheeled herself toward the piano. It sat near the edge of the porch, a beat-up upright someone had donated months ago with a note that simply said, "She still sings if someone's willing to listen." Mercer hadn't touched it. Too many memories. June used to play. Badly, but with heart. Sometimes Gracie would mash the keys beside her, turning noise into joy. Junie had looked at it a dozen times, even brushed her fingers across the lid once, but never opened it. Until now. Mercer watched from the kitchen doorway, towel over his shoulder, holding his breath. Junie's hand her left. The stronger one pressed a single key, then another. The notes were tentative, but not unsure. She moved her fingers slowly, then repeated a short sequence again. It was nothing fancy, just a 4-note progression. But it made Mercer's chest ache. "Where'd you learn?" he asked softly, stepping onto the porch. Junie glanced over her shoulder. "My mom. She played church hymns on an electric keyboard. We didn't have much, but she said music made you forget what was missing." Mercer nodded. "Sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Junie said. Then, after a beat, before she got tired, she went quiet after that, eyes dropping to the keys. Her fingers hovered, then dropped again, carefully picking out the beginning of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The notes were slow-spaced with long silences, but they held something sacred. Mercer pulled out a chair and sat beside her, not speaking. When she reached the last note, she let her hand linger. "I only have one good hand now," she said quietly. "Can't play the hard stuff anymore." "That wasn't the hard stuff," Mercer replied. "That was the true stuff." Junie looked at him confused. "Any fool can play fast," he said. "Takes guts to play honest." She smiled, then small but real. That evening, after the dishes were stacked and the last of the regulars waved goodbye, Junie remained at the piano, trying to pick out chords to songs she barely remembered. Mercer sat nearby with a notebook, sketching out a rough schedule for the coming week. Nothing official, just scribbled plans for chicken fried steak, Wednesdays, and peach cobbler Sundays. "Think we could host a music night?" Junie asked suddenly. Mercer looked up. "Like, people come and play, not just me." Mercer considered it. "We'd need flyers, maybe borrow folding chairs from the church, and a tip jar," she added. "So folks feel like musicians." He nodded. "All right, let's do it." Junie leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Then her expression softened. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever think about dating again?" The question caught him so off guard he almost dropped his pen. Sometimes," he admitted. "Why?" She shrugged. I worry you don't let yourself want things anymore." Mercer exhaled slowly. "I used to think wanting was dangerous," he said, "because everything I ever wanted got taken." Junie nodded. "Me too." They sat in the stillness that followed, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be broken. Then Mercer added, "But maybe I'm learning again." "Learning what?" "That sometimes the things worth wanting want you back." Junie looked at the piano, then at him. "Then I think we're both learning the same thing." Later that night, Mercer found a piece of sheet music on the counter. Pencil written, carefully notated. At the top, Junie had written, "Song for the second table." In progress, "One good hand. One good reason." That's enough to begin. He picked it up, held it to his chest like a prayer. And in the quiet of the kitchen, with only the sound of the ceiling fan whirring overhead, Mercer whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you for sending her, June." The first customer came just after noon. She was a wiry woman in a postal uniform with a sunburn across her cheeks and letters tucked under one arm. She didn't look like someone who lingered, but that day she did. She took a seat at the table nearest the porch railing and asked, "Is this still just coffee and kindness, or do y'all serve pie?" Now Mercer, standing behind the counter with his sleeves rolled up, called back, "We serve whatever we've got, and kindness comes free refills." Junie, already seated at her place behind the counter, grinned. Her sketch pad sat open beside her, but she closed it and wheeled over. "What kind of pie are you wishing for?" The postal worker chuckled. "Something with peaches. But I'd settle for something with hope." Junie pointed at the display case behind her. "Lucky you, we're serving both." They all laughed. And with that, the second table truly opened for business. Word had spread since the courthouse hearing, quietly, subtly, like it always did in towns like Willow Bend. People had started stopping by, not just for food, but for what couldn't be named warmth eye contact, and a sense that the world hadn't gone entirely to hell. Mercer kept the menu small, cornbread stew, iced tea, and whatever pie he could manage. But the portions were generous, and no one was turned away, not even the drifter with a busted guitar, or the woman who always asked for extra napkins to stuff in her purse. Junie became the quiet soul of the place. She sat behind the counter most days, sketching, talking, making small decisions that made big differences, like which tablecloths made the porch feel less temporary, or how many sugar packets to group per caddy. She took orders from strangers with grace, and when she said, "Welcome in," it didn't sound like something she was taught, it sounded like something she meant. One day, a man in his 70s, wrinkled, sunbeaten, and wearing a Vietnam vet cap, ordered 2 bowls of chili. Mercer brought them both over with a question in his eyes. The man gestured to the empty chair across from him. "The second one's for my wife. She's been gone 6 years, but she still sits with me when the food's hot." Junie watched quietly from the counter. After a moment, she reached for her pad and began sketching. An hour later, she handed the man a pencil portrait. His face slightly turned toward the wind, with a ghost-like outline of a woman across from him. She'd drawn her hand on top of his. Just fingertips. Just enough. The man didn't say anything, just wiped his eyes and folded the drawing like a sacred thing. Later that night, after the last chair was stacked and the porch swept clean, Mercer stood at the sink scrubbing dishes. Junie rolled in from the front, her sketch pad tucked under one arm, and a thoughtful look on her face. "You ever think about turning the place into a real restaurant?" she asked. Mercer looked over his shoulder. "Isn't this real enough? I mean, like, signs, menus, business licenses, real taxes. Sounds exhausting." Junie smiled. "It would be. But it'd also mean we could keep going. Maybe even hire someone. I don't know. It just feels like it's bigger than us now." Mercer dried a plate. "I never planned for this. I just wanted to give someone a plate of food and a reason to come back. And now," she said, "you've given that to a dozen people. Maybe more." Mercer paused. "I still don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "None of us do," she replied. "But some of us do it with heart. That counts." He turned and looked at her. "You think you'd want to run a place like this someday?" Junie's face grew serious. "Yeah, I think I'd want that." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess we better learn how to keep the lights on." The next day, a little girl, maybe 8 years old, came in with her mom. She had a hearing aid in one ear and a pink notepad clutched in her hand. Junie greeted her, as she always did, kindly, softly. The girl's mother leaned down and whispered something, and the child nodded shyly, then wheeled forward a page from the notepad that said, "You don't walk like me, but you smile like me." I like that. Junie's lips parted. She touched her own chest. Then she picked up a pen, turned the note over, and wrote, "You don't have to walk like me. You already shine like yourself." They traded grins, awkward and beautiful. From behind the counter, Mercer watched the moment unfold, like something too delicate to touch. That night, as they sat on the porch under the stars, Mercer turned to Junie. "You're building something here," he said. She looked at him, brow raised. "What do you mean you've got more than sketches now? You've got people who wait to see you, who walk away a little lighter because you smiled at them." She looked away, embarrassed. "I'm just a girl behind a counter." "No," he said, firm but gentle. "You're the reason they come back." Junie blinked hard. "You think so? I know so." She leaned back, stared at the sky. "Then I guess I better keep showing up." The sun was beginning to slip below the horizon, casting the diner porch in amber light. It was the golden hour, Mercer's favorite time of day, when the dust didn't seem like dirt, but something holy in the air, glowing and weightless. He was rinsing out a coffee pot when the knock came, not at the front door, not on the porch rail where children sometimes tapped coins against the wood for fun, but at the back. 3 gentle taps, hesitant, like the hand doing the knocking wasn't quite sure it belonged. Mercer dried his hands and walked toward the sound. He opened the door. Standing there was a woman in her late 30s, elegant but road-weary. She had sandy blonde hair tied back under a scarf, a loose button-down shirt tucked into jeans and boots that looked like they'd seen every kind of road. Her eyes were green and red-rimmed, as if sleep hadn't visited her in days. "Can I help you?" Mercer asked. The woman swallowed her voice, catching. "I hope so," she said. "I was told I might find someone here. A girl, about 12, in a wheelchair." Mercer's shoulders rose just slightly. Depends on who's asking. She hesitated, then pulled something from her purse, an old photograph creased at the corners. It was Junie. Younger, maybe 7. Sitting in a plastic kiddie pool, her hair wild and curly, grinning up at the camera, with ice cream smeared across her face. "She's my daughter," the woman said. Mercer didn't speak. His hands fell to his sides, fingers curling unconsciously. "She was taken from me," the woman continued, voice thin. "Not by the courts, by her father. We weren't married. He had partial custody. One day he just disappeared with her. I searched for months, years, hired people, put her face on websites. But there were no records, no sightings, no answers." Her voice cracked. "Until last week. Someone sent me a message, a photo of a drawing. They said she drew it for a veteran at a porch diner outside Willow Bend." Mercer remembered the moment instantly. Junie's sketch of the man and his invisible wife, her gift, her gentleness. He looked into the woman's eyes again. Tired, but unmistakably alive. There was no deception there, only ache. "I'm Olivia," she said. "And I swear to you I've never stopped looking." Mercer stepped back. "She's here," he said. He didn't have to say more. Olivia gasped, and her hand flew to her mouth. "I need to prepare her," he added gently. She nodded. "Of course." Mercer found Junie in the back room folding dish towels with mechanical precision. She looked up when he entered, her eyes searching his face. "What happened?" she asked. "You look weird." Mercer crouched in front of her, not speaking for a moment. "There's someone here to see you," he said. Junie blinked. "Who?" He hesitated. "She says, she's your mother." Junie's face went blank, the way it had when Mason showed up. But then slowly, a flicker, a different kind of shock. Not fear, not even hope, just disbelief so deep it had no name. Mercer placed a hand over hers. "I think she's telling the truth." Junie stared at him. "I don't remember her." Mercer nodded. "That doesn't mean she's not real." Junie looked away, voice barely audible. "I'm scared. I'd be more worried if you weren't," he said. "But I'll stay close. Whatever happens, you're still you. You still have me." Her bottom lip trembled. "Can I meet her?" "Out front." At the table, Mercer smiled. Of course, the porch had never been quieter. The plates were cleared, the chairs spaced, the light just dim enough to feel safe. Junie wheeled herself out with slow, deliberate movements. Olivia waited at the far end. Her hands clasped her entire body, braced like one breath might shatter her. When their eyes met, no one spoke. For a long moment, it was only stillness. Then Junie said, "You were in my drawings. I didn't know it. But you were there." Olivia stepped closer, tears spilling now. "I was never far," she said. "Not in my heart." "Why didn't you find me?" I tried, Olivia whispered. He hid you so well. Junie's voice cracked. He hurt me. I know, Olivia said. If I'd found you sooner. Junie shook her head. You're here now. That was when Olivia dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to Junie's hand. I don't expect anything, she whispered. Not forgiveness. Not miracles. Just the chance to know you. Junie reached out tentatively, awkwardly, and laid her hand on top of Olivia's. Mercer turned away, letting them have the moment. Later, as the sun fully disappeared and the porch was lit only by the soft glow of the hanging lanterns, Mercer sat at the edge of the steps, watching dust settle like stars across the floorboards. Junie joined him. She wants to take me with her, she said quietly. Mercer's heart stopped, then started again heavier. What do you want? Junie didn't answer right away. I want to know her, she said. But I don't want to leave you, Mercer swallowed hard. You don't have to choose, he said. We'll find a way. Junie looked up at the sky. You think family is who raises you. No, Mercer said. I think family is who stays, who shows up. Junie leaned her head against his shoulder. Then I guess I have two families now. And for the first time in Mercer's life, he understood something he'd never allowed himself to believe before. Sometimes the people we lose make room for the people we were meant to find. The peach trees were blooming early that year, odd for Arizona, but fitting somehow. Mercer stood at the edge of the garden behind the second table, pruning shears in hand, listening to the quiet bustle of the porch as it came to life. It had been almost a year since Junie first asked for his leftovers. Now she was inside, not as a guest or a girl with nowhere to go but as a partner. Her drawings lined the inside walls, framed now, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. The diner had grown slowly, like roots beneath dry soil, finally given rain. Word of mouth had done what marketing never could. Travelers, workers, mothers with loud children, quiet men with memories too heavy to carry. All of them found their way here eventually. Some stayed 10 minutes. Some stayed all day. All left lighter. And today, it was Junie's 13th birthday. Inside, she was surrounded by people who hadn't known her a year ago, but who now considered her family. Gracie Mercer's daughter sat beside her, giggling over some inside joke. Olivia, Junie's biological mother, stood near the pie display chatting with two women from town who had helped outfit the diner's first official kitchen. No tension. No forced lines between past and present. Just people who stayed. Should I bring the cake? Mercer asked, stepping through the back door, a tray of hand-cut peach scones in his arms. Junie rolled her eyes. That's your solution to everything. Scones. They're sweet. They're quiet. They show up when nobody else does. Sound familiar? She smirked. Fine. But there better be candles. There's 13, he said. And one for luck. Gracie raised a hand. Wait, that's 14. Junie shrugged. Guess I'm extra lucky. Mercer set the tray down and lit the candles carefully. As the flames flickered, Junie's face glowed not with firelight, but with something harder to name. Healing. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and blew them out. No wishes spoken aloud, just a hush of flame, the smell of wax and sugar, and the soft applause of people who knew what it meant for a girl like Junie to still be making wishes at all. After cake, the porch quieted. People filtered out with hugs and gentle goodbyes, promising to return for Tuesday's chili night or Friday's song circle. Junie wheeled herself next to Mercer on the steps. The air had cooled just enough for the breeze to feel kind. Remember the first day I showed up here? She asked. Mercer nodded. You wanted my leftovers. She smiled. I didn't know you were offering everything. He looked out at the dusty street, the peach trees swaying in the wind. I didn't know I had anything to offer, he said. Not really. She nudged him with her elbow. You gave me a name carved into wood. You gave me a reason to carve it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Junie said, "Olivia asked if I wanted to move in with her. Full-time. In Tucson." Mercer didn't move, and he said softly, "I told her I'd visit. A lot. That I wanted to know her. But I want to stay here." He finally turned to look at her. "Why?" She shrugged. "Because this is where I started becoming myself. Not surviving. Becoming." He couldn't answer, not with words, but he reached over and gently laid his hand on hers. She gripped it back. That night, Junie hung a new drawing on the wall. It was simple. A table, 2 chairs, a plate in the center. No faces. No names. Just the shape of something waiting to be shared. Beneath it, she'd written in looping letters, "Some leftovers feed the body. Some eyes feed the soul." The second table. Mercer read the words twice, then again. There were no tears. Not this time. Just warmth. Quiet. Fullness. In the months that followed, the diner became more than a place. It became a rhythm. Junie organized a once-a-month stories and sketches night, where guests could eat for free if they brought a memory or a photo to share. She started teaching drawing to kids on Saturdays, even the ones who didn't speak much or at all. She taught them how to look at people, how to see them. Mercer took over the kitchen full-time, refining his biscuits, finally nailing the peach cobbler recipe that even Gracie admitted was better than Grandma's. He smiled more, slept easier. The ache in his chest that once echoed like an empty room now pulsed with quiet joy. And though grief still lived in the corners, June's memory, old songs on the radio, it no longer ruled the house. One afternoon, Junie wheeled herself onto the porch with an envelope in her hand. She handed it to Mercer with a grin. "What's this?" he asked. "A letter," she said. "But this time, you're the one who gets to read it." He opened it. "Dear Mr. Wade, thank you for giving me my daughter back, not just to me, but to herself. You saw her before the rest of us could. You gave her room to breathe, to believe, and I will never stop being grateful for that. You may not have signed her birth certificate, but you've signed her life with something stronger." Love, Olivia. Mercer folded the letter slowly and tucked it into his pocket. Not to forget it, but to carry it. Just like he would carry Junie. Gracie. June's memory. And every guest who ever walked through the porch with hunger in their heart. Because sometimes you don't choose who sits at your table, but you do choose to leave a seat open. That night, Junie wheeled out one last thing, a new wooden sign carved by hand. Mercer hung it above the porch with her watching. It read simply, "The second table where everyone gets a place." And below that, just faint enough to be missed by some, but clear to those who knew eyes in the dust, hearts in the light. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and let us know where in the world this story found you. It's always incredible to see how far kindness can travel. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, gentle, true, and full of quiet strength, consider subscribing to the channel. There's always room for one more at the second table. Thank you truly for spending part of your day with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the power of simply showing up.